Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Okay, so please welcome our presenters for today. They are our subject matter experts for GP Strategies Employee Engagement Solution, and it is my pleasure to introduce them to you today. We have Colleen Casey, who currently works on employee engagement and measurement as a GP Strategies consultant. She consults with organizations to understand their culture and key priorities and determine a listening strategy that resonates with the organization and creates meaningful change for its workforce. She also provides one-on-one consulting for leadership teams on survey results and taking action. She's a graduate of Rutgers University and the Sorbonne with a master's degree in political sociology. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Colleen. Sorry, I'm not doing great French.
It was perfect, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we also have Annie McManus. She leads the employee engagement practice and works as a consultant and project manager. She strives to understand the listening goals of clients so they can better understand employees' needs and the perspectives on the culture. She also consults the potential clients to provide strategic solutions that align with the needs of our partners. In addition to managing survey implementation, she also certifies engagement champions and collaborates with our clients on post-survey strategy. She's a graduate of William Smith College and with a bachelor's in psychology. We have a great session for everybody today. And with that, I'd like to be able to turn the floor over to you, Colleen. Sorry, I have a little mouth problem there.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Kim, for the introduction. And thank you so much to our participants for joining us today on this very important discussion. So in terms of our agenda, we're going to talk about the 2022 norm. We're going to talk about engagement trends that we observed in our 2021 data sets and some of the key takeaways that we have to share with you today. We'll discuss listening strategies and what the best practices are for implementing those listening strategies. And then Annie's going to wrap up our time together today to talk about effective tools for taking action on what you learn from your own employee surveys. So I want to start looking at this 2022 norm, workforce dynamics. Really, the whole purpose of this is going to be to do some context setting about the world that we have been evolving in. We've all been through some turbulent times since March of 2020, I think it's safe to say. We have the public health situation, COVID-19, pandemic. I think that we're in the next phase of the pandemic, which is pandemic fatigue. Everyone's ready to take off their mask and jump back into the world again. We'll see how it goes. As we know, this has been in fits and starts. So we've had a public health situation that's been very concerning, very weighing on the world. We've also seen significant movements for racial and social justice, both in the US, mostly a lot of the talk around Black Lives Matter, but we've also seen some of this abroad. If we think about the context of what's happening in Europe or in France with yellow vests, we know that there's a lot of social movements and of significant importance that are happening at this moment. We think about political situations when we look abroad. At the moment, we have an armed conflict in Europe, some calling it the most significant armed conflict since World War II. And here in the United States, we've got political polarization at home. You know, I remember talking to a colleague around the time of the election, and I said to her, regardless of your political leanings, I think the one thing that we sometimes share is our collective exhaustion with the constant polarization that we face. We also have climate change that is weighing on us, the consequences of which put the very existence of ourselves, the world, in question. And we also have been dealing with some interesting market factors. So the Great Resignation, a very hot topic right now. A lot of employees are looking for work elsewhere. It is an employee market. Retention is a huge issue for many organizations. So a lot of things happening in the larger external world, whether it's political, public health, economic. We know that there's been a lot of things happening. Now, you might be saying, why is she talking about this? Did I miss the webinar and turn on the evening news by accident? There is a reason that I wanted to bring this up. I think that understanding the context that we're evolving in, understanding these factors are incredibly important because we know that this is impacting how employees show up at work. When people come to work, they bring their whole selves with them. And all of these things that are happening in the larger environment are really impacting how they show up at work, and they're carrying this with them. I think if we think about the pandemic in particular, it really made this idea of the whole self and the presence of the whole self at work very clear. It wasn't possible to no longer see the full person and our colleagues, our manager, our employees when there were children in the background and pets who were maybe interrupting Zoom calls and Teams meetings. So it's just very important for us to keep in mind that context. And it's not just employees who have been impacted by these external factors. All of these external elements also have posed fundamental challenges for organizations and their ability to deliver on mission and strategy. These factors have really forced many organizations to reevaluate how they operate, forcing them to look at everything from how they run the business to how they manage their people, and in some cases, even to relook at what is their purpose. And some examples of this, we have seen many organizations take on the role of public health expert. So really interesting to see HR articulating safety measures and policies responsible for testing and contact tracing within their organization. Also, with the pandemic, we've seen more flexible working arrangements appear. Remote work to the degree that we have seen it really started as an employee safety measure, right? Social distancing. And now this has become a pretty common and normal expectation for many employees. And this is forcing a lot of employers to rethink what that presence in the office looks like and how can we implement hybrid arrangements that meet the need. All of these social and political factors that I discussed, organizations have had to think about, do I take a stand? And if I decide to take a stand on these issues, how am I going to do that? We have seen that with Black Lives Matter. We have seen that in the reaction of certain organizations to the 2021 Capitol attack, most recently to the war in the Ukraine, with many organizations changing how they interact with Russia on a business level. So again, this level of corporate activism is something that's a little bit new in our times. And then we talked about the Great Resignation, talent attraction, and retention. It is an incredibly competitive market for talent. Organizations are being forced to reevaluate their value proposition. Does our pay and benefits package measure up with what they can find elsewhere? Are there other things that we can offer to creatively attract that talent? Does it look like training? Is it increased part-time PTO? Is it increased flexibility? So really rethinking about what are we offering to our employees? Is that going to help us retain and attract the top talent that we need to succeed? And even thinking about, do we have more creative ways that we need to think about filling positions, focusing more on internal hires and promotions, and in some cases speeding up the hiring and promotion process, because we know when we find a candidate that's good, they could find a different job within the 24 hours that we extend that offer. So these turbulent times are impacting employees, they're impacting organizations, and what we're seeing is that this is having some significant challenges when it comes to employee engagement. But what is employee engagement? So I want to walk you all through our X model of engagement just to get grounded in how we approach this. The way that we look at this, organizations are on a path to success. That path to success is defined by our values, our goals, and our mission. In order for organizations to achieve that definition of success, what they need is a maximum level of contribution from every employee in the organization. But it's not just about the organization. Employees too are on their own path to success. And we know that that path to success looks different for different people. Some people might be looking for a greater work-life balance. It might be about career progression, compensation, meaningful work. We know that it looks different for different people, but ultimately the way that we see it is that employees are looking to experience a maximum level of satisfaction from the work that they do on a regular basis. And these two paths to success meet every single day on the job in your organizations. And we know that at any given time, levels of satisfaction and performance can vary. There are times when very high satisfaction working here, but I have no idea what needs to get done. I'm not giving the resources to achieve what needs to get done. So I love my job, I love my colleagues, but I'm not really positioned to help the organization achieve its definition of success. And there's other times where we're giving a lot to our organization, but we're not having our own individual needs met. So levels of contribution and satisfaction can vary at any given moment in time. I know that everyone on this call today can relate to that. There's times when you come in and you are at that maximum level of satisfaction and contribution, and other times where both of those things might be a struggle, or maybe it's on the satisfaction and not the contribution component. But ultimately for us, we think that engagement is happening when employees are experiencing maximum satisfaction from the work that they do while they're contributing at a maximum level to the goals of the organization, to helping the organization deliver on its mission and strategy. That's happening right here in this orange triangle, what we sometimes refer to as the apex. So we think about employee engagement, it's about this mutually beneficial relationship where both employee and organization needs are being met. And these two things, satisfaction and contribution, go in tandem. In order for organizations to deliver on that strategy, engagement needs to be a part of how they do the work on a regular basis. A really simple way for us to talk about this is great days at work. This idea of great days at work is very much tied to our internal research, to our training, to external research that we publish. And when we talk to employees about what a great day at work looks like, no one ever says to us, it was a great day at work because my boss was out of the office, I got to take a 2-hour lunch, I did some online shopping, I left the office early. Sometimes days like that might not be so bad. Sometimes we might need days like that. But when we actually talk to employees about what a great day at work looks like for them, there's always this element of satisfaction from what I was working on, how I was able to get that work done, who I was working with. And that element of satisfaction is always combined with an element of contribution, achieving things, finishing projects, taking things to the next level, to the next step. It's not just about the satisfaction component, it's about getting things done, it's about that contribution element. And a really simple way for us to talk about this is great days at work. And I love this concept of great days at work because I think it really connects people emotionally with what it feels like when we're at that apex. So that's our definition of employee engagement. I want to ask a question to our participants today. So how is your organization working to maintain and improve employee engagement at the moment? So Kim just started the poll. You can all put your answers in.
So Colleen, people are working on that, so I would give it another 15, 20 seconds.
Okay, sounds good, Kim.
Okay, I'm gonna close it up if it seems like everybody's got their answers in there. You ready? Yeah. It's taking a couple seconds just to tabulate the results, and as soon as that is, you should be able to see them in a couple seconds.
That sounds good, Kim. And I think I saw in the chat someone said the organization was doing more than one thing. So that's excellent to see. So I know that we might have a few who are going to share with us that nothing's being done. So. Taking a look, so it's definitely a split. It looks like lots of different things for different organizations. Providing greater flexibility comes in strong at 18%. They were talking about this. This is followed by providing development opportunities. Training our leaders to improve their management skills is another hot topic that seems to be addressed. And we have just 8% that said nothing was being done. So I think that's a positive. So those are our top actions to maintain and improve engagement that we're seeing. And this is actually great to see because this really aligns with what we're going to be talking about on the next couple of slides, which are our key takeaways, the engagement trends that we observed in our 2021 data. So our research showed that engagement increased from the pre-pandemic period to 2021. So 70% of the workforce in our database was highly engaged, and this was an increase of 3 points from the period before 2021. And what this looks like is better alignment on immediate and organization goals. They're more connected to their organization. They're more in a position to give discretionary effort to unleash their potential. But at the same time, they're reaching their own personal definitions of success and delivering success to their organizations. So while engagement is trending up, we do still see a significant portion of the employee population that falls into an engagement risk category. So this is 30% of the workforce, almost a third of the workforce in our database. And things look a little bit different for this group. They're not aligned. They might be working hard, but not necessarily on the right things. They might be working hard, but not having their own needs met. They're not achieving success. They're not positioned in a way to help the organization achieve success. So while we have improvements happening, we still have to take into consideration these engagement risks. And when we looked closely at the data, our data was showing that the majority of these employees who are at risk, this 30%, the main challenge for them and that they are grappling with at the moment is burnout. Employees are giving a lot to their organization, but their own needs are not being met. We kind of dive into this topic of burnout. So a recent Indeed survey showed that burnout is on the rise. A plurality of employees said that they have experienced burnout in 2021, 52%. This is up almost 10 points from the pre-COVID survey period. So this is something that is more pronounced than what we have seen previously. We have 8 out of 10 employees who are experiencing work-related stress at the time of the survey. And all of this is resulting in, for employees, a lack of motivation, a lack of effort at work, as well as significant emotional and physical fatigue. And this burnout factor is really important for us to keep in mind because these are employees who have a high capacity to give discretionary effort, to put their work towards what the organization needs to get done. But since their own needs are not being met, they're at risk of either leaving organizations and finding work elsewhere in this very attractive talent market that they are faced with. Or worse still, they might retire in place. And what I mean by that is that they're going to continue to be with the organization, but now their lack of satisfaction is going to be accompanied by a lack of willingness to give discretionary effort to contribute at that maximum level. So burnout is really important when we think about this engagement landscape and what needs to be done for employees in 2022. So burnout is the risk. What can we do to address burnout and make sure that employees' needs are being met? So some of the key areas that we found in our 2021 data set in terms of what employees were looking for, what could be some potential areas to address that burnout? So 40% of our respondents cited professional development as something that would improve their satisfaction. They want career opportunities. They want opportunities to grow and develop their skill sets. And many organizations are looking to respond to this, to invest in their internal talent, as opposed to constantly focusing on recruiting from the exterior. How can we have promotion, advancement opportunities within our organization? How can we invest in their training and learning so that they're getting what they need in that professional development area? And a recent survey that was conducted by Capterra showed that 49% of organizations that they surveyed were increasing their learning and development spending in 2022. And that was up from 41% in 2021. So many organizations are starting to invest in this. They have understood this. So something really important to keep in mind in terms of addressing burnout going forward. Also, flexibility is hugely important for people. 18% talked about flexibility as something that would improve their satisfaction. This, I do not think, comes as a surprise to anyone on this call today. And I think a lot of this is sort of due to the pandemic. For many employees, they had never had the opportunity to work from home, to experience that kind of flexibility. They've gotten a taste for it, and now there is no turning back. And many organizations are looking to respond to this through that hybrid strategy, trying to articulate a hybrid strategy that works for them and trying to deliver that hybrid experience in a way that is successful. And what this allows is really for employees to experience the best of both worlds, allowing them to be in person, which facilitates connection between colleagues and between managers and employees, and also culture, but at the same time allowing them to have greater flexibility in work from home options, which is allowing for a better balance between work and life. As you are all thinking about this, and I'm sure grappling with this idea of hybrid and what to do and how is it going to be successful, and we're going to see, honestly, I think is the answer. Return to office has kind of happened in fits and starts. I think this is really the first serious attempt that we are seeing for people to go back in office and to test out that hybrid strategy. So it'll be important to kind of get the baseline of how it's working now and then tweak to see what you can do to improve that hybrid experience. Because we know that hybrid can be challenging on a lot of levels, and we know that there is risks to virtual work as well. Sometimes virtual work can actually increase burnout. It can be a little bit exhausting, that lack of boundaries between home life and professional life. And we also know that sometimes virtual work, working from home, means that people are working longer days and they find it more difficult to disconnect than if they were in the office. Kim is going to share with all of you in the chat. Our colleague Leah Clark a few months ago did a great webinar about handling hybrid challenges that I recommend everyone to take a look at for some ideas in terms of how to successfully manage that hybrid environment. And our third area for addressing burnout, just as important as that flexibility question, is employees talking about higher compensation as something that is an important retention factor for them. Again, when we look to the external world, we see that many employers are looking to respond to this need. So Willis Towers Watson's conducted a survey which showed that U.S. employers expected to pay an average 3.4% raise to their workers in 2022. And we see lots of stories about places like McDonald's that are offering $500 sign-on bonuses. Target, in some of its more competitive job markets, is raising their minimum to $24 an hour. So we think about this idea of compensation, and really I would say any of these three topics, this is something you're going to want to be mindful of, thinking about how can you implement this, how can you replicate some of those actions, because if you're not giving it, someone is going to give it to them. They are going to find an organization, an employer who will provide them the things that they are looking for. And I think that all of these different factors that could address and minimize burnout really make sense to me. To me, I think that employees are really asking themselves, am I getting what I need from my organization? Is my organization investing in me? Is my hard work recognized through professional development and compensation? And ultimately, the question is, am I valued by my employer, by my organization? And this idea of value makes a lot of sense on a human level, but it's also just plain good business at the end of the day. So I have this quote from Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Group. So employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. Happy employees, satisfied employees, fully engaged employees are employees who are going to, like I said, be enabled to deliver on the needs of the organization, help us reach our definition of success, our mission. And I'm sure everyone on the call today has had some experience with organizations that don't invest in their employees. Think about those experiences. Think about what that felt like, what the level of service was. Think about the bad attitudes that you encountered or the errors that happened and your subsequent willingness to use their goods and service. It's really important to think about putting employees first, being employee centric, because ultimately this is going to help you deliver business results. So another key takeaway from our research that I'm very happy to report back is leadership gains. So we looked at that individual dimension. Burnout is something that we need to watch for, but engagement isn't just about the individual, it's also about the leadership structure that they're evolving in. And there's things that managers can do to support high levels of engagement. Managers are really at that intersection between organization and employee needs, and they need to align those individual needs with the larger goals and priority of their team, their department, the organization. And I was really pleased to see that managers have improved on important factors related to their competency as leaders, but also the connection that they're able to create with their employees. So if we look at that connection component, 85% of employees in our database said that they feel they have a great working relationship with their manager. This increased 4 points from the previous period. 76% feel that their manager is building a strong sense of belonging within their team, up 6%, or 6 points, excuse me. And then on the competency front, we see that managers are doing better at empowering employees, asking for and acting on their feedback, and they're also doing a better job at providing employees feedback to them on their work. So these results were, like I said, great to see. It's inspiring to see managers are really rising to the occasion. And to some degree, I really think that there are so many things about the turbulent times that we have all experienced that have made managers more intentional in terms of how they lead their people. On that competency front, working from home, we can't really rely on the happenstance of in-the-moment feedback or getting aligned on what needs to get done when I bump into someone when I'm making my coffee in the kitchen. And when we think about the level of empowerment that is happening, it's possible that on those virtual meetings, I may need to do more to get the input from my employees and pull them into the conversation. And also being able to see employees' faces so visibly might help me better pick up on those very subtle signs that someone has something to say, but they're not taking the opportunity to express themselves. And I think on the connection piece, again, how these turbulent times have positively impacted connection between employees and managers. Ultimately, we can't ignore the outside world, and they need to treat their employees as full human beings and not just as workers. As a manager, you can't pretend that the pandemic isn't happening. You can't brush off the death of George Floyd or ignore that people are struggling to balance their family and their work obligations when we see those things interrupting work on a regular basis. These situations have really required a heightened demonstration of empathy and understanding from managers, and they seem to have understood that and acted in kind. And I think ultimately, too, when we think about that connection piece, managers have also showed up as full human beings. They've also struggled with the same things that their employees have, and they've had to be transparent about their own challenges and struggles that they have faced. And then it's not just that manager population. We also see that senior leader and executive teams have made great progress between 2021 and the pre-pandemic world. So we see that they are doing more to communicate, and in particular, communicating a sense of purpose to the work that is done by their organization. And they've also done more to create an environment where employees can unleash their potential and discretionary effort, creating an environment that is conducive to high performance. And I think, again, these results really speak volumes. It's really amazing to see how organizations have risen to the occasion during these difficult times. And I always like to talk about this when I'm discussing this with clients, is really thinking about what did we learn from that situation of crisis, and what are the things that we can continue to do and to use in a world that's somewhat more normal than what we have perhaps experienced over the past 2 years. How do we take the crisis handbook and make it perennial? And Kim is going to share in the chat another great resource for all of you to look at, which is, again, by our colleague Leah Clark, which addresses changes and transformations in leadership and reinventing leadership. And finally, addressing burnout, making sure our leaders have the skills that they need to motivate and inspire employees is important because, again, we're living in that age of the Great Resignation. A lot of ink has been spilled on this topic. We see lots of different reasons that are being put out around this idea of what is driving that Great Resignation. Many employees have reevaluated their organizations. Like I said, am I being invested in? Do I feel cared for? Do I feel valued in this organization? They've also reevaluated their own aspirations, priorities, and how they're spending time. A lot of talk about YOLO these days. And also sometimes when we're doing the cost benefit analysis, it just isn't making sense to stay with our current employer. And we see some of that happening with women who are leaving the workforce to take care of childcare duties. We can also see it with some of the trends that we see in the healthcare professions, particularly nursing. So we know that the Great Recession is upon us, and we see this reflected in our own data. We have a number of our client organizations who are experiencing record turnover, who are grappling with how to manage it. And what we observed in our 2021 data set was that a little bit over a quarter of the workforce could walk out the door any minute. They told us that they're unsure or they're not going to remain with their organization through the next 12 months. And there's many things that we can do to look at talent retention, but we do see that there's a relationship between engagement and retention when we look at our data. In our most recent review of the data, 8 in 10 of fully engaged employees said that they plan to remain with their organization through the next 12 months. This is compared to just a quarter of that disengaged population. So understanding engagement in your organization is a crucial element to attracting and retaining your top talent. So those are our 3 key takeaways from our data in 2021. So is engagement so much different now after all of the contextual things that I discussed? Are there new strategies that need to be adopted? How does this look different now? So one thing that's important to keep in mind, I think, is that engagement is evergreen, if you will. In order to keep your team engaged, in order to create an engaging work environment in your organization, we need to know what drives satisfaction and contribution and address those things. So on some level, the recipe is the same. It's very much what it was previously, but it's really the external context that has changed. And really what stood out for me in a lot of the data, with the exception of our manager and our senior leader results, was the absence or the very small changes in the trend from year over year. And like I said, that recipe is the same. Professional development, flexibility, compensation, feeling valued, all of those things are just as important as they were 5 years ago. They're just as important as they were 10 years ago. But that context is changing, and it's making it much more pressing for organizations to respond to those needs. Because like I said earlier, if you're not doing it, someone else is. Now, you may be wondering, how can I improve engagement in my own organization? Well, the best way to know is to ask the question. I think before you begin to act on engagement, it's really important to take a step back and learn from your employees what the opportunities are. And the starting point for that is really to conduct a survey. So I wanted to talk about some best practices for listening strategies to make sure that when you implement that listening strategy, you're going to get the insights that you need to create meaningful change for your organization. Now, it starts with our survey design. How do we articulate that measurement strategy? One element is our survey construct, and this is all about the questions that we're asking on that survey. You need to make sure that you're asking questions that reflect and address your organization's culture and your current strategy. You also want to make sure that you are asking questions that you can act on, because there's no point in asking someone something that you have no intention of ever doing anything with. I think for anyone who is on the call today who is already implementing a survey, it's really about how do you adapt your survey tool to reflect the major challenges and changes that are impacting your workforce and your business. Hybrid work environment, diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are two topics, for example, that are particularly hot topics for our clients, and we can certainly see the relationship between that and what's happening in the external world. So what we ask is important, but just as much as what we ask is important, it's the data that we collect that we have to be mindful of. What that means right now is that you want to be collecting data on working arrangements. You want to know who is hybrid, who is in person, who is permanent remote, so that you can take a look at the data and see how the hybrid environment is impacting your culture, employee dynamics between managers and senior leaders and employees. You also want to be collecting data to better understand the experience of historically marginalized groups in your organization. So these are, for example, gender identity, sexual orientation, race and ethnicity. Again, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very important topic for all organizations to be looking at right now. And then the final recommendation, I would say, would be really taking a look at attrition data. Who is saying that they're not going to be staying with your organization, and how do their responses look different from other employees in the organization? This is going to help you stay on top of those flight risk factors and ensure that you don't lose that top talent. So there's design, there's our measurement portion as well. And this is about gathering the data and the insights from the survey. Accessibility is crucial. We want to make sure that all employees have the opportunity to share their voice, have the opportunity to have their voices be heard. So you can administer the survey via email, but if you have employees who are not often working on a computer, you're going to have to adapt that strategy to make sure that you reach them. We run into this a lot when we work with county and local governments, where we're working with employees who are in police departments, medical centers, parks and recreations. And what we often do is find other ways for them to access the survey, whether that be a paper survey or using a QR code where they can access the link online to take the survey, but really making sure it's accessible for everyone so everyone's voice can be heard. But it's not just about accessibility. We also need to have appropriate messaging and positioning of the survey. And what I mean by this is really a robust communication strategy that explains what the survey is, why it matters for the organization and employees, and what they can expect to happen with those survey results. And then after we have designed our survey, gathered the information, we have to take those results and take that data, take those numbers and make sense of it. We need to use the data to tell the story of what is happening in our organization. So you'll want to be reviewing overall results for your organization, how that compares to an appropriate benchmark. At the same time, conducting statistical analysis and demographic review of the data. And all of this is really going to help you understand the story organization-wide. That would be the global aspect. And also, what are some of the outliers that you see in the organization? What are the local stories from a demographic perspective, from a manager team perspective, from a department perspective, from a gender identity perspective, to really have a holistic view of the organization. And then the final phase is all about taking action on those survey results. Ultimately, we tell our clients that the survey is just a starting point for the most important piece of this process, which is to take those numbers, take that information, and use it to inform our actions going forward. So this is about thinking about how do we distribute data? Who are we going to share with, and what are we going to share? There is no right or wrong answer here, but do keep in mind that only those who have access to the data can be held accountable for creating change in the organization. It's also about bringing our employees into the conversation by sharing results with them and exploring their ideas for improving things and maintaining strengths. And finally, it's about articulating a plan to take action on those survey results, determining priorities and areas of focus, and communicating that back to employees. I can never stress enough the importance of closing the loop on communication. Lots of times we see organizations do amazing things, but since they don't tell people, and they don't tell people specifically that this was from your feedback on the survey, there's a feeling that nothing happens. So really important to always communicate back what we have decided to focus on and how we've done it. And not one time, over the year, keep communicating back. So another poll for us, how is your organization taking action to address survey results? So we have that poll up and running now.
And I just wanted to remind everyone, if you do have any questions for our presenters, to make sure that you add them to the Q&A section on the panel, so that we, given time, can answer those for you. There's just a couple more people in progress, so I'd say we give it about another 10 seconds.
Okay, thanks, Kim.
Yep. I'm gonna close it now. Seems good.
And it looks like the results are in. So our top actions to address survey results. So communicating the results, 28% of you said that is what is happening at your organization. And this is followed by 13% that have some kind of employee committee dedicated to taking action on those survey results. And we have just 5% that said that we have dedicated tools and resources to address survey results. And this is what we're going to discuss right now. I know I said it's all about action and taking action, but I understand that it's also easier said than it is done. But one of the key elements that can enable you to take action is having tools and resources to help you do so. And Annie is now going to walk us through some of the tools that we have available that help our clients take action on results and create meaningful change for their employees.
Thank you, Colleen. If you could just pass presenter over, that would be fantastic.
And I actually don't have the ability to make you presenter. Kim, can you make Annie presenter?
Yeah.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Should be getting that now.
Got it.
Thanks, Annie.
Thank you. All right. So we'd now like to take you into our People Insights platform so we can explore some ways to locate meaningful insights related to our discussion today. So let me share my screen. Okay. So managers are able to access both direct and rolled up data, along with a comparison, typically department or company. So managers will begin their data exploration on this engagement highlights page. This dashboard shows key metrics from the survey, including engagement levels. Now, while this information is interesting, leaders won't spend a lot of time here. I will acknowledge that, of course, we have the ability for managers to drill into each survey question. And additionally, business leaders, more senior leaders, are able to explore the results of the teams that report into them. I'm not going to dive into those pages today, but we will take a look at engagement levels next. So this page enables managers to understand their team's engagement levels. They can view data, they can access videos to better understand engagement levels, and ultimately how they can create an environment that supports full engagement. And as Colleen referenced earlier, engagement data should be looked at in conjunction with engagement factors, which is the next page that we'll explore. So that's related to satisfaction and contribution. And for instance, if your team is highly contributing but has very low satisfaction, you'll want to prioritize solving for their satisfaction needs. In the engagement factors section, so here we explored choose the item that would most improve your job satisfaction or most improve your contribution. So managers can explore this information directly related to what employees are telling them that they need or want in order to increase satisfaction and contribution. So it's critical to discuss this data during team meetings. The data indicates that different employees have different needs, and managers have to keep this in mind. They cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach to engagement. We do sometimes talk about engagement as an individualized equation. What drives satisfaction and contribution looks different for everyone. And addressing these things at the individual level is where leaders can have the most impact. Let's now look at flight risk. So here managers can get a better understanding for their employees' retention intentions and specifically what you can do to keep them. Now, remember, a large percentage of folks saying that they're intending to stay with the organization is good only if your team has high engagement levels or there's hope. Not everyone's in that disengaged group. So if you do have a large majority of your team in that disengaged place, the work's not working for them, they're not able to contribute. If you can't coach them up, it may be a time to discuss coaching them now. So that's a snippet into our, I can't get to this part of the screen. There we go. That is the manager view. Sorry, there's overlays on this. That is the manager view. I do also want to take a look quickly at what we can provide our additional stakeholders. So our key stakeholders on the project, we are going to get them additional data so that they can understand really what's happening across the organization. So in this view, and let me just select this question here for an example. So for each question asked on the survey, stakeholders can explore results across all demographics. For instance, if we're looking at this question, it is safe to speak up and constructively challenge things around here. We could explore this by, let's say, ethnicity or gender. And here we're able to see the favorability, neutral, disagree, or unfavorable perspectives across that data. We can see how that data differs. Additionally, within our trend view, we can also explore how data has changed over time, how the perceptions of these groups have changed. So in this example we're looking at on the screen, what we're looking at is male and female perspectives of this question. We can see that there was mostly a slight difference between these groups within the 2015 to 2018 cycles, 2016 pretty consistent. However, as we're looking more towards the current situation into our 2021 groupings, we can see that the gap widens between these groups' perspectives. So this change over time would be very important for a key stakeholder to understand, be able to act on it. And lastly, we do also have a view, we call it the stoplight. This heat map view is really useful in identifying outliers within the organization. I expand our flight risk here. So here we're able to see the retention profiles and how those who intend to remain with the organization have a different perception or experience than those who are unsure or who are definitely not intending on remaining with the organization. So throughout this area, we can see that managers and our key stakeholders have access to meaningful insights from the survey data. However, as we've mentioned, a couple times so far, the data is only part of the equation. So utilizing data in conjunction with team discussions and a continued focus throughout the year, that's what's ultimately going to drive that positive change. So after exploring the data, it's time for a manager to meet with their teams to confirm understanding, prioritization, and the specific needs of that team. Then we can strategically act on strengths and improvement needs. So the last area that I'm going to share with us today is action planning. As we discussed several times, it's critical that this action occurs. I'm going to continue to drive that point home in our last few minutes. It is definitely worse to ask employees their feedback and do nothing with it than to not survey at all. So firstly, I want to take a look within our team meetings area to highlight some of the tools that we have available for managers. So team meetings offer a way to communicate findings, get the team on board, and identify actions that everyone on the team can take. This discussion guide contains key sections that should be integrated into the meeting, such as opening, discussing the data, what the team and manager need to do, and providing upward feedback and closing the discussion. And for each section, we do have these quick tips available for managers, and this is really to help guide them when constructing the discussion and formulating their speaking points. After the team meeting has occurred, managers can return to this section to summarize the commitments made and complete a short survey about their experience. Key stakeholders will be able to view team meeting summaries and help support managers in their action planning and identifying any themes that may need to be acted on more widely across the organization. And that's what Colleen was referring to, the local and the global needs to be considered. And the last area I'll point out is this action plans. So this action plans area, this enables managers to receive on-demand recommendations based on the question or topic that they wish to act on. So managers can select the survey question that they'd like to focus on from this drop-down list, and targeted advice will show that will help them move the needle on this specific topic. They then can take this guidance, add their notes to the action plan, how they actually want to implement it, what they're going to do. They can mark their progress, come back throughout the year and update this. And the information entered on this screen is visible to managers up the organizational structure so that senior leaders can see trends across teams that roll up to them and ultimately help their managers progress in their plans throughout the year. So that is what I wanted to share on our site today. And now let me bring it back up. Slides. All right, so listening is just the beginning. In case I haven't said this 5 times in the last 5 minutes, you do have to take action. And it's not just about listening once, you do need to do follow-up surveys. You need to keep listening to your employees. Don't abandon your survey strategy because of the external factors that we discussed earlier, what's going on in the world. Employees' needs are not going away. And if you do want to respond to and engage your employees, you are going to need to keep your finger on the pulse. And Colleen, is there anything you would want to add before we move into our Q&A section?
Nothing from me. I'd be curious to see if we have any questions or any discussion with our participants.
Okay, thanks Annie and Colleen, that was great. It was a great discussion. And again, if you have any questions, add them to the Q&A module. We have just a couple minutes. I do have a couple of questions, so I'll start with, do you recommend giving all managers access to the survey results?
So I think it depends. This is kind of a conversation I often have with clients. I actually wrote an article about this, a blog post a few years back, and it depends because it depends on where your organization is at. What is our organizational maturity with the survey process? What is the maturity of our manager population? Are they ready and prepared to see this data? I can tell you when a manager looks at a report and there's results on whether or not their people trust them, or if they have a good working relationship, or if they feel treated as an individual, that can feel very, very personal. So I think that that is where you want to get. That's the end goal, is to be in a place where you have a culture that supports that type of transparency, where people can take this information and use it in a positive way to create better working environments. So certainly giving it to all managers, that is the end goal. But I would say sometimes it can take a couple of survey cycles to get there. And some of our clients, what they'll do is in a first survey, they might just leave the results with the executive team. And then in a subsequent survey, they might roll down to the next level, and so on and so forth, year over year, expanding the transparency on the survey results. So like I said, I think it depends on manager maturity, organizational readiness, but ultimately that is where you want to be, where all leaders can use this information in a meaningful way. But I think when it comes to anything around an employee survey, a listening strategy, you really need to adapt the strategy to your organization's culture, to the internal dynamics. There's no one size fits all to this process. Annie, is there anything you would add?
No, I don't think so. I think the only other thing I was thinking about as you were talking, you ended up covering. So no, nothing else to add there.
Okay, great. And I guess this is probably a really big question, but how frequently should we run a survey?
And I would say for this, it again depends on your organization. The major thing that I tell my clients is do not survey again until you've had the opportunity to act upon the feedback you've received before. While we do understand you can't move mountains in between survey cycles, so some items that are action items from the survey may be a longer burn, it may be more of a 2 to 3 year strategy. But I would never recommend surveying before action has been taken, before employees have seen a chance for at least something either local or global to happen.
Good takeaway.
Absolutely.
All right, we have a couple minutes left. Colleen, did you want to add on top of that?
No, I was just going to add to what Annie was saying, that really the frequency of the survey has to be determined by our ability to take action on results. Anyone who's telling you that you have to survey every single quarter, every 3 months, once a week, it's not necessarily in your interest if you're not able to act on that information. So really important to think about as we survey, what is the timeline for us to take action to address the feedback that we have received.
Thanks. How about, I got 2 more questions, so hopefully we can get them in the next 2 minutes. How should we adapt questions for hybrid?
So I think with this question of hybrid, it's not so much asking different questions, because in terms of asking different questions, you're going to exhaust it pretty quickly, right? Are you satisfied with your hybrid working environment? Is it working well? So really what I've been recommending for our clients to do is to ask questions on certain topic areas that we know are impacted by hybrid: professional development, connection, diversity, equity, and inclusion, contribution. So to ask those questions, which might already be part of the listening strategy that they have in place, but in addition to asking those questions, we also want to make sure that we're capturing data about who is hybrid, who is in person, who is full remote. That way we can understand those questions and those topic areas through the hybrid lens.
Annie, do you have anything on top of that? No? Okay. Well, I do want to say that we are hitting the top of the hour, so I just want to go ahead and start wrapping things up. To start, thanks again to today's presenters, Colleen and Annie, and thank you to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We hope that you'll join us again for an upcoming session. You can go to our website, gpstrategies.com, under webinars to see our upcoming webinars, also view any of our archived webinars. And with that, I want to wish everyone on the call a wonderful and productive day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you to our participants.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.